Let's go to Senator Mark Warner on this and so much else. The Senator, of course, is the Senate Select Intelligence Committee chairman, much more. It plays a crucial role in the Senate Banking, Housing, Urban Affairs. So if you think about it, two of the biggest issues this week, Afghanistan, what happened there, and this $3.5 trillion budget that Democrats are trying to push through by the end of the year. He will be a principal player in both. Senator, always good to have you.
Neil, thanks so much for having me.
We talked briefly about this important testimony today from the Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, and many have been arguing for his head, that the guy should resign, that there seems to be a push to fire somebody in the White House for its handling of this whole thing. How do you feel about that?
Well, Neil, let's go ahead and give Secretary Blinken the chance to make his case. I know we will talk to the House today and the Senate tomorrow. I can tell you from where I sit, and as chair of the Intelligence Committee, we are going back and reviewing all the intelligence leading up to the pullout. I've got real questions. For example, why was there not a break the glass plan, even that could have been implemented in those last 8 or 9 days as the provincial capitals started to fall? Why did the administration still put any trust at all in the former Afghani President Ghani, who it appears pushed back against the American and other NATO's allies' requests to try to consolidate their forces to protect the capital? So I've got questions that need answered, but I also think we need to acknowledge that particularly our military really rose to the occasion. The fact that we got 125,000 individuals out of Afghanistan. That was a historic airlift. Obviously, the tragedy of the bombing a couple days before the final pullout, where we lost 13 brave American soldiers, was a great tragedy. But we have even seen, in the absence of Americans, we have seen, until the last couple of days because of health reasons, the Taliban continuing to allow people to leave the country. So this is a very tricky balance. I don't trust the Taliban at all, but we still do have an obligation to get some additional folks out of Afghanistan, and I'm going to be anxious to hear what Secretary Blinken has to say. I also will be having, my committee will be having a number of hearings with leaders of the intelligence community.
Senator, the administration does not seem to concur with what's a prevailing sentiment that the collapse of Afghanistan was nothing short of a disaster, and that it's on him. Was it a disaster, and is it on him?
Clearly, getting out some of those images, we'll never forget of some of the chaos at the airport. I think one of the biggest challenges, for the whole administration would have been being more forward-leaning to tell the American people that when we leave, and clearly the vast majority of Americans realized we needed to get out of Afghanistan, but should have been clearer from the whole administration that getting out was not going to be easy. It was going to be a challenge. It was going to be messy. Did it have to be as messy as it was? I don't believe that, but I'm going to get those questions answered for myself, and then our committee at the appropriate time will also make what we learn known to the American public. I said that at the very beginning, Senator, and we're going to follow through.
Indeed, you did. So, Senator, do you think some of the provocative actions we've been seeing out of some questionable players, including North Korea launching cruise missiles overnight, China, getting pretty feisty when it comes to re-engagement in Afghanistan, to say nothing of maybe considering sending ships into our waters, because it argues we are doing that in their waters, even though they're not their waters. But you know what I'm getting at here, that they're testing President Biden because of what happened in Afghanistan.
Neil, I'm not sure I would make that direct connection. I would say that, ever since President Trump's failed outreach to Kim Jong-un, we've basically given him multiple years now to build up his capacity, and we ought to be under no illusion that regime is hostile to peace in that part of the world and hostile to our country, and we ought to treat him as such. But I would argue the circumstance with China, and for that matter, Russia as well, that our constant focus on the Middle East and terrorism only has excluded and sometimes allowed us to take our eye off the ball in terms of where I think the real challenges come from Russia and China. Russia in terms of misinformation, disinformation, and candidly, Neil, as we've talked many times, there has never been an economic competitor the size of China that we've had to ever contend with, at least since the end of the Second World War. And China clearly, from intellectual property theft to being provocative in the military to candidly, a level of investment in cutting-edge technology is really where we got to keep our eye on.
You mentioned the economy. If I can go back to this $3.5 trillion human infrastructure package, you've expressed some concerns about it. I mean, a lot of people focus on your colleague Joe Manchin, and Kristen Sinema, but there just does seem to be a growing number of crucial Democrats who have their doubts. What is your issue with the package as it stands?
Well, I want to make sure, first and foremost, it's paid for. I was the guy who, it seems like it was ages ago, the only member on the Budget Committee that said to the President and said to Chairman Sanders, any plan that's $5.5 or $6 trillion is way too much and cannot be paid for. I know many of your listening audience still thinks that the 3.5 that I came up with is still too high. I actually think if we can pay for it effectively and appropriately without making American business non-competitive on the global stage, and the idea that a paid-for package spread out over 10 years, I don't think is going to have the kind of catastrophic effects on inflation or on other items.
Do you think this is paid for then, Senator, as it stands now, that this is paid for, with some of the tax hikes that have been considered?
We have seen the House lay out their menu. We in the Senate, I'm also on the Finance Committee, are working through a different menu. I'm not going to support anything that's not paid for, and I think the House has got some good suggestions.
But are these the means to
pay
for it, Senator? I just want to be clear. Are these the means to pay for it? I know you're right. This is a House idea where they want to raise the top rate. Of course, it's been expressed before. The 39.6% surtax of 3% on those with incomes of $5 million or more, raise the corporate rate beyond the 25% that Joe Manchin wants to something like 26.5%, hike the capital gains rate up to 20%. That's a lot of tax hikes, Senator. Does it concern you?
Well, I've laid out that I was not going to go as far as Biden on, for example, the corporate rate. I'm more in that 25 to 26 range. I do think returning capital gains all in at about 28, where President Reagan had, and having about a 10-point differential makes, I can live with that. Taking people like me back up to 39%, I think makes some sense. Making sure that everybody who does do well, has to actually pay, not avoid that 3.8% Obamacare tax. I think that makes some sense. And I think there's a way, one of the things that the 2017 tax cut did is it took American business from nominally being some of the highest taxed in the world to being far and away the lowest. I think there ought to be a midpoint in between that keeps us competitive. And I think part of that as well would mean Secretary Yellen needs to get us that global minimum tax. That'll go a long way as well. I hear the music. It's my time for me to tune out. I hear you.
We're rude, aren't we? Senator, I want to thank you very, very much.